You think you've seen bad westerns? Well, hold your horses, partner, because today we're taking a ride through the wildest, dustiest trail of cinematic failures ever saddled up in the 1970s. These movies didn't just miss the target. They dropped their guns, tripped over their boots, and somehow managed to shoot themselves in the foot. So today, we're counting down 10 of the most painfully bad westerns from the 1970s. Films so awkward, so misguided, that even the cactus looked embarrassed to be on set. Tut, The Great Scout and Cat House. Thursday, 1976. We start off with a comedy western that somehow forgot what comedy means. Lee Marvin and Oliver Reed star in this bizarre story about aging frontiersmen chasing stolen gold. And absolutely none of it works. Imagine two powerhouse actors wandering around the desert, cracking jokes that land flatter than a wagon wheel. The movie can't decide if it wants to be a slapstick romp or a gritty adventure, and it fails at both. Marvin looks like he's trying to stay awake, and Reed seems like he's wondering why he signed the contract. Even the title sounds like a punchline that doesn't make sense. Critics called it tired, confused, and unfunny, and audiences agreed by staying far, far away. It's the kind of movie that tries so hard to be clever, it forgets to be entertaining. Catlow, 1971. On paper, this one should have worked. Yul Brynner as a charming outlaw, Leonard Nimoy as his rival, and a classic cat-and-mouse setup. But Catlow turned out to be less of a western and more of a cinematic tumbleweed. Filmed in Spain, it tries to capture that spaghetti western magic, but ends up looking like a bad parody of one. The pacing is off, the editing feels random, and Brynner, normally magnetic, seems like he's counting down the minutes to his next paycheck. Even Nimoy, fresh off Star Trek, can't save this mess. Reviewers described it as frenetic yet boring, a rare combination. It's a film that looks like it should move fast, but somehow drags on forever. 8. Zandy's Bride, 1974. How do you make a Gene Hackman movie dull? Apparently, this is how Zandy's Bride pairs Hackman with Liv Ullmann in a bleak story about a mail-order marriage on the frontier. It wants to be a serious character study about isolation and emotional distance, but it ends up being a slow, joyless slog. Hackman's character is so cruel and unlikable that it's hard to care about anything that happens. Ullman does her best, but the story gives her nothing to work with. The movie drags its feet scene after scene, as if it's afraid of something interesting happening. Even critics trying to be polite called it clunky and depressing. The sweeping landscapes are beautiful, sure, but they can't save 2 hours of misery disguised as realism. SETI, A Gunfight, 1971. Two legendary stars, Johnny Cash and Kirk Douglas, face off in a duel for money and pride. Sounds epic, right? Unfortunately, a gunfight moves slower than a horse with 3 broken legs. Cash, while an incredible musician, just doesn't have the acting chops to carry a film. Douglas tries to elevate the material, but the script is full of overwrought dialogue about life, death, and honor, none of which actually feels profound. The movie promises tension and spectacle, but delivers endless scenes of the two men brooding and talking about their feelings. By the time the big showdown finally happens, most viewers are half asleep. It's not the worst premise ever. It's just executed with all the excitement of watching paint dry on a saloon wall. 6. The Hunting Party, by 1971. Oliver Reed, Gene Hackman, and Candice Bergen. 3 great names, one very unpleasant movie. The Hunting Party is mean-spirited, graphic, and shockingly tone-deaf. Hackman plays a ruthless rancher hunting down Reed's bandit character using a long-range rifle. What could have been a tight revenge thriller turns into an endurance test of pointless violence and poor storytelling. The film seems to think that cruelty equals depth, but instead, it just feels ugly. Every attempt at emotional drama collapses under waves of blood and brutality. Critics called it disturbing for all the wrong reasons, and they were right. Even the Spanish backdrops can't make this slog any prettier. 5. Dirty Little Billy, 1972. This one takes the gritty realism trend way too far. Dirty Little Billy tries to show the early life of Billy the Kid as a filthy, hopeless drifter. But instead of feeling authentic, it just feels depressing. Michael J. Pollard, who was great in Bonnie and Clyde, is totally miscast here. His Billy isn't dangerous or magnetic. He's just whiny, weak, and perpetually covered in dirt. The movie moves at a crawl, full of scenes where nothing happens except people looking miserable. It's as if the director thought grime equals genius. Unfortunately, audiences didn't agree. Even hardcore fans of revisionist westerns found it unbearable. The whole thing feels less like a western and more like punishment. Farter, The Train Robbers, 1973. You'd think putting John Wayne and Anne Margaret together would guarantee sparks. Instead, The Train Robbers feels like a western that forgot to wake up. At just over 90 minutes, it somehow manages to feel twice as long. Wayne plays yet another aging gunfighter on a treasure hunt, and he looks like he'd rather be home watching TV. The supporting cast goes through the motions. The dialogue feels recycled, and even the action scenes have no bite. Director Burt Kennedy had made fun, energetic westerns before, but here it's like everyone's running on autopilot. There's no passion, no tension, no excitement, just a lot of horses riding in circles. 3. The Great Northfield, Minnesota Raid, 1972. This one had potential. It's based on the real story of the James Younger Gang's ill-fated bank robbery. But instead of a thrilling retelling, we got a confusing, uneven mess. Robert Duvall and Cliff Robertson try their best, but the tone swings wildly between comedy, tragedy, and gritty realism. One moment it feels like a history lesson. The next, it's a cartoonish parody. The editing is sloppy, the pacing uneven, and the big raid scene is filmed so chaotically that it's hard to tell what's going on. Director Philip Kaufman wanted to de-romanticize the outlaw myth, but he forgot to make it engaging. It's a film that doesn't know what it wants to be, and ends up being nothing much at all. 2. The Spikes Gang, 1974. Another case of great idea, bad execution. The Spikes Gang follows 3 naive farm boys who fall under the influence of an aging outlaw, played by Lee Marvin. What starts as a coming-of-age story quickly devolves into a joyless morality play. Ron Howard, yes, Happy Days Ron Howard, plays one of the boys, but he's painfully miscast. The tone is all over the place. One minute, it's lighthearted and adventurous. The next, it's bleak and violent. The emotional whiplash leaves you dizzy. By the time it reaches its tragic ending, you're not sad. You're just relieved it's over. It's not outrageously bad, just bland, dreary, and utterly forgettable. 1. Paint Your Wagon, 1969–1970. And here it is, the gold-plated disaster that defined bad Western for an entire generation. Paint Your Wagon isn't just a Western, it's a musical Western starring Lee Marvin and Clint Eastwood. Yes, 2 tough guy legends, singing. This 3-hour epic cost a fortune, and looks it. But every dollar feels wasted. The plot, 2 prospectors sharing the same wife, was supposed to be cheeky and unconventional, but it's mostly awkward and tone-deaf. Neither Marvin nor Eastwood can sing, and watching them try is equal parts hilarious and painful. The pacing crawls, the songs are forgettable, and the tone is all over the place. Even Eastwood later admitted it was one of his worst career decisions. Critics called it corny, confusing, and endless. It's become a cult. Curiosity, a shining example of what happens when Hollywood throws money at an idea that should have been laughed out of the room. And there you have it, folks. 10 westerns from the 1970s that completely missed the mark. The 70s were a strange time for the genre. Filmmakers wanted to reinvent the western, make it more realistic, more psychological, more modern. Sometimes that worked brilliantly. Other times, well, you just watched what happens when it doesn't, so I want to know, have you seen any of these cinematic train wrecks? Which one do you think is the worst of the bunch? Or did we miss a terrible 70s western that deserves a spot on this list? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this countdown, give it a like, hit subscribe, and check out our other worst of deep dives. We've got horror, sci-fi, and action disasters that'll make you appreciate the good stuff even more. Until next time, ride safe, watch wisely, and remember, life's too short for bad movies, unless you're watching them with friends. In that case, saddle up and enjoy the chaos.